safety first. We have a saying here, we want to live to drink another day.
I'm your host, Jeff Sart. We're going to take you behind the scenes with the craft distillers who are pouring their heart and soul into crafting the next version of America's spirit. This is the Great American Whiskey Cookers. Hey, welcome to this edition of the Great American Whiskey Cookers. It's cold here at the Bourbon Bunker, as you can tell by the leaves turning behind us, and we're wearing coats. But we are headed to Lyons, Colorado. We're going to go talk to Craig Engelhorn and his wife Amanda at Spirit Hound Distillery and learn all about the single malt whiskey.
And we're going right by an important historical marker in Gothenburg, Nebraska. It's one of the few places where there is an original Pony Express station. No, Pony Express! Anyway, one of the original ones, and what's fascinating to me is the Pony Express only operated for about 18 months. So they had to stand up the entire business, get everything organized. They had the horses.
Welcome to Great American Whiskey Cookers. We're here today at Spirit Hound Distillery in Lyons, Colorado. We got the guys here from Spirit Hound Distillery, and we're going to get into some very specifics of the distillery. Guys, tell us who you are and what's going on.
I'm Craig Engelhorn. I'm the head distiller and one of the co-founders. Have been making whiskey for 10 years now.
Great.
Neal Sullivan, one of the co-founders, and the 10 years that Craig and I and Matt have spent together running this place have been the best 10 years of probably my adult life. I'm a whiskey drinker, but what I enjoy most about what we're doing here is the craft nature of it and the artistic nature of it. And so loving what we do, and going to continue down this path with Craig as long as he'll have me.
And so there's one other co-founder or owner, right?
Yes.
Partner, Matt.
Yep.
Right? Matt's not here today.
Right.
So explain to us, the first question I think that everyone's going to have is, how does the partnership work? Who does what? How do you fill those roles? And how does all that work?
Easy for me. I'm kind of the production guy.
Okay.
Right? So
you're distilling.
Technically production manager.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm distilling and I'm running a crew of people distilling
Right.
and packaging and all the other kind of fun.
And that means
fun
bottling and barreling
Yep.
and taking care of all of that that's in the production house, right?
Yep.
Okay.
I also kind of do a little of the finance world.
Okay.
But as we grow into more of a big kid company, that role is going to have to get taken over by somebody who actually understands finance. I'm an engineer.
Okay, so you're an engineer. What kind of, mechanical, electrical?
Electrical engineer.
Okay.
By training, and computer scientist. I was a software developer for Bell Laboratories for years, so finance is not my thing.
And Neal, where did you come from? And one other question I want to know is, how did the three of you get together?
Yeah.
Know each other for a long time. What's the scoop?
So I have about a 20-some-odd year in healthcare consulting and a couple academic degrees in that, and was doing that when we started this distillery and enjoy doing that. But I was doing consulting, sales, and stuff like that. So parlay into what we've been doing the last 10 years, back to your question, Matt and I have spearheaded kind of strategic projects in the distillery from time to time, where Craig is owner-operator here 80 hours a week or more, that kind of owner, where I've stepped into sales roles, helping to guide the organization, more strategic planning, stuff like that. And so at some point, I left my career in healthcare consulting and realized that both this business and I have a small retail European grocery market here in town as well, could benefit more from greater presence. So I've been leaning more into this business. And so going back to your earlier question, I've lived in this town for 15 years. And early on, Matt and I were having a conversation about what we were seeing on the horizon about craft distilling growing. And this was 15 years ago. And so we bump into Craig at some odd point in the conversation in town, and he says, well, I helped start the one of the best known breweries in town. And I've always felt like I could and should get into craft distilling. And we were like, well, we're having a parallel conversation. Let's sit down and talk together.
And what year was this?
That would have been 2010. Yeah.
2010.
Oh, wow.
And so we sat down over a beer at a local pub in town. And Craig's like, well, here's what I've been doing. Here's my background. Here's what I really want to stay involved in. And I'm like, I think I could add this to the table. Matt was a full-time veterinarian at the time. And he says, I can add this to the table. And we said, let's make a run at it. And that's kind of how it got started, honestly.
So I'm seeing the still behind us. It says still number 2.
Yes.
Where's still number 1?
Still number 1 was the experimental still that I built out of I'm doing this keg of beer with plumbing parts.
Yeah.
And I had never distilled before. And now we're starting a business. And there are people, and
Yeah.
there are, others involved in lives and money. And
Yeah.
so, God, I probably ought to figure out how to do this first. So I built a still, did some experimenting, and that was still number 1. And it was actually just stupid little, 15.5 gallon beer keg with a 2-inch copper column about this tall out of it. As our experimental still, it was our gin still for about 7 years. And it was very small. The basket of botanicals was like this big.
Okay, so for the camera,
Yeah, we were talking like 2 tablespoons.
2 tablespoons.
Yeah, tiny.
Okay.
And I would change the basket every gallon of gin at 170 proof, every gallon of gin that we produced. So it was a very labor-intensive thing, almost popping new baskets in.
And how often would you have to do that?
Every 30 minutes, 40 minutes or so.
Okay.
But I wanted fresh botanicals going in all the time. So that was that was part of the magic of what made our gin so amazing. And there were other distillers that, they can remain nameless, but I know that they were kind of like Craig at Spirit Hound with his little tiny still. That's what a dummy, I mean, he's changing baskets all the time. I think that still generated about, I don't know, $1.5 to $2 million in revenue over its life.
Pretty good.
It owes me nothing.
Right.
It cost,
you got your money.
It cost a couple $100.
Our whiskey this year just took top honors, best in show, highest rated whiskey in London, which we just couldn't believe. And so the growth right now is whiskey sales are up 125%.
From last year or from 3 years ago?
From last year.
125% just from last year.
Just with the spike of that recognition around that award. We had been growing in double digits, no problem, prior to that, but that growth has been exciting, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So the growth and the future is very much on the whiskey forefront. It's why we got into this. But the growth is also in the clear spirits that we make that are fantastic and well received.
So tell us, I'm looking at a still behind me, and rumor has it that you built this by hand.
I did.
So tell me the process. What did you go through to build this still?
Well, it started its life as 3 very expensive flat sheets of copper. I was a woodworker. I understand wood.
Yep.
I am not a metal worker. My previous experience with metal was taking like a piece of metal and bending it in an angle for some flashing, right? That was the limit.
And you thought you'd make a still.
Yeah. I mean, I've even restored some old cars and wouldn't touch the sheet metal because it's the black art.
Right.
Big learning curve. So I decided to build a still. And this was kind of predicated on the fact that we couldn't afford or wait for the stills that were commercially available. I told my partners, you buy me some equipment and, buy me some copper and I'll make it happen.
So about this still, and you hand built it, the whole thing, right? This piece, this, the onion, the whole thing. copper has a lifespan,
Yep.
right? So how long have you been running this still?
10 years.
All right, so 10 years, what's the lifespan on this?
I don't know. And I don't have any easy way to detect the metal loss that we're getting. So, what's happening is every time we use it, we basically lose lose some copper every
bit.
damn time. And that's a real problem.
So you're talking about, and we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but staying in that same vein, you're talking about expansion, adding another still or two, right, for production value. So, so you can scale up. So do you think that'll possibly replace the still at some point in time?
At some point it probably will, because again, I don't know when this thing will start to leak. It appears to be fine currently. Hasn't leaked in 10 years. Okay. But at some point, some piece of copper is going to get a pinhole in it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's like, shit. But I love this still, and maybe when we expand, what we'll do is we'll use this for a little more specialty stuff.
Sure.
Right? And
and this still is making your whiskey.
It is.
Right.
Every drop of whiskey we've ever made.
Year to date, we're at 53%.
Yeah, but it's still a big stress on finances, production, sales. I mean, everything in the organization.
Well, to that point, I would love for Craig to share right now that we have been doubling and now tripling our production of whiskey. And one of the greatest challenges we're running into is where the heck do you store it? Because we're making so much of it.
Yeah, you guys are packed to the gills back here.
Oh, we are. We're busting at the seams.
We use every inch we have.
Okay, so Craig, you walked me back here to where you store your barrels.
Yep.
Right? So tell me a little bit about your barrels. What's your char level? What's your storage like? All the stuff that the whiskey geeks really want to know about.
Yep. Okay, so we're using primarily char number 3. These are 53-gallon barrels, so full-size whiskey barrels.
Okay.
They're from the Independent Stave Company in Lebanon, Missouri.
Okay.
Char number 3 is pretty heavy char.
Yep.
We have a few char number 4s, like here's a char number 4. So we're kind of,
You're
experimenting a little.
Right.
And for us, char number 3, we were counseled when we started this from Independent Stave. I'm like, all right, we're making a malt whiskey.
Yep.
We're in Lyons, Colorado, blah, 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 blah. This is what's in it. And they're like, char number 3, full-size barrel is what you guys want to do. And they were right.
Right out of the gate.
Yeah, love what these barrels do for me. In this particular rick house, if you will, we stack just 3 high because it's short.
Yep.
And this continues around the corner to the end of the building.
Yep.
So I have probably third of my barrels in here.
Okay.
I also have 2 shipping containers in the back with barrels in them for barrel storage because my building is only this big and we're making a lot of whiskey and it's got to go somewhere, right? But I do love this barrel room. We don't really do any temperature control. We don't do any humidity control.
So Colorado temperature, however it fluctuates, it's affecting what's in here.
Yep. We get hot summers and the whiskey expands and it pushes into the barrel, and we get cold winters and it shrinks back down. And seasonally, I've learned I can check these barrels, once a quarter, but certainly like twice a year. Yeah. And I can tell where they're going. You can taste the seasonal difference. Don't necessarily get a difference from one day to the next. Right. But by golly, after a season change,
you can tell.
You can tell.
What's your typical aging on a barrel before you bottle it?
Okay, 3 years.
3 years.
Yep. We have barrels that are up to 6.5 years old right now. I think, honestly, for me as a distiller and a whiskey lover, I think 4 years, 5 years. That's kind of our sweet spot. Okay. We tasted a rye earlier. That
rye was delicious.
Yeah, that was 5 years plus. It might have been 6. It was a pretty old barrel. It was really nice.
Yeah,
right?
It was delicious.
But I also know from our barrel number 1, the first barrel we ever produced, at 7 years, we were starting to chew on the oak a little too much. So there's a limit, right? And we lose approximately 14, 15, 16% of for the Angel share in about a 2.5 year period.
So how many bottles, when you go to bottle a barrel, how many bottles are you getting out of the barrel?
If I cut it all to 90 proof, I can get about 300 bottles. Okay. Which is a pretty good yield. But what we do is we'll take a barrel out, because these are all single barrels. These never get mixed together. Right. So at someday, malt whiskey barrel number 498 is going to get taken off the rack, and we're going to pull it into a stainless steel drum. We're going to check the exact proof. We're going to check the weight. Now we gauged it. We know exactly what we have. The first thing we do before we touch it is we bottle a few cases of splits of 375s at cask strength, whatever it happens to be. And so you get that bottle and it says, 63.7%, right?
At cask strength.
Yeah.
And I can buy it here at the distillery.
Absolutely. So our entry proof is almost always 125. That's the highest we can go to make malt whiskey, right, by law.
Okay.
And here in Colorado, we increase in proof over time because the water's evaporating out of the barrel. We're high and dry, faster than the alcohol is evaporating out of the barrel.
Okay.
So we end up at about 130, typically 132 proof.
Yeah.
And we bottle. So we'll take a barrel. We empty it into a stainless steel drum. Really no filtration. It goes through a cheesecloth sock to keep the biggest chunks of char out of your bottle.
Right.
And we gauge it, so we weigh it. We know exactly how much we have. We check the proof. And first thing we do is we'll fill a few cases of 375s at cask strength, untouched. I like to say, as God intends us to drink the whiskey. Right out of the barrel.
And I can buy that here at the
You
distillery.
can get that right here at the distillery. Then we take the rest of the barrel that's still in the drum, and we figure out how much water to add to it to cut it to 90 proof. And we bottle the remainder of it at 90 proof. That's kind of our standard bottling strength. We chose that with our first 5 barrels that came out. We sat down with several tasting panels and tasted at 80, 90, 100, 110 proof. And 90 was that was the sweet spot.
That's a sweet spot.
Yeah. 80 was too sweet.
Yep.
100 was really pretty good. 110 was a little too hot for most people. So. We actually experimented. I have previous beverage alcohol experience as the original brewer for Oscar Blues Brewing, which started here in Lyons. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I learned we're a very small system. My average yield was like 6.2 barrels of beer barrels, not whiskey barrels, right? So 31 gallon barrels or measurements. And I learned very quickly that a system that was 3 or 4 times the size would give me 3 or 4 times the beer and would take me almost no more labor, right? And so when we started this, we had a chance to score some 1,000-gallon fermenters from an old rock bottom in Cleveland, Ohio. And there were 6 of them. And we haven't distilled a drop yet, but I knew that we should get them because let's build this thing so that we can grow at least a couple of times without having to go, okay, well, rip up the floors, build a new building, let's do that.
Right.
So we ran under capacity for a long time. So that was forethought at the very beginning. And for me as the production guy, my job here is to make sure that this stuff is the best stuff I can possibly make. And we're not going to just start cranking out a whole shit ton of it just to have more.
Right.
What's the challenge in maintaining the same quality as production ramps up? I mean, from your standpoint.
Yep. One challenge is in the equipment, right? So I have the equipment in place that's made our whiskey from day one, and we can get up to, say, 25 barrels a month with this equipment.
Okay. How much are you making right now?
We're at about 21.
About 21 barrels.
Yep. We just turned up the knob here last week.
Are we talking 53-gallon barrels?
53-gallon barrels.
Okay.
Yeah. We, I personally don't really believe in small barrels.
Okay.
There's a white paper from Buffalo Trace that'll back me up on that. But anyway, you can make some pretty good whiskey in a small barrel. But here in Colorado, especially being high and dry, the small barrel doesn't work. You extract the oak so fast, there's no maturation that happens.
Sure.
You don't get the esters and the aldehydes that make it so yummy. Anyway, sorry that I
Whiskey
sidetracked
geek nugget. You want that?
Yeah. So the question was, what's the challenge in maintaining that quality as everything ramps up?
All right. So the next challenge is going to be, we're going to run out of distillation space, right? So the poor little still is running 24/7. That's as much whiskey as we can make. Well, what do you do? Now you have to have more stills. And when you add equipment, things change. So the challenge is going to be, first of all, tailoring the new equipment to have some of the same characteristics as our current equipment, right? Like we have an onion and a tapered column. But it'll be bigger. So that will change how the whiskey comes out of the still. I know that distillers, especially in Scotland, if they manufacture a new still, will now, in the modern day, digitally map the still that they're reproducing so that if there's a dent that might make a difference in their flavor, they put the same dent in the new still.
That's crazy.
We don't probably have the capability to do that, but we will have to add equipment. And so it's going to be my challenge to do what I can to maintain all the other things. So we have the same grain supplier. All of our malted barley comes from southern Colorado, right? And so that will continue. We'll just have to get a lot more of it.
Right.
And another thing that is important with the quality of the product is your staff, right? So we do everything manually here, and my staff has to know what the cuts taste like. And we spend a lot of time, there'll be 2 or 3 of us standing at the still like, I don't think it's ready. I think it's ready. No, I don't think it's ready. And we talk about what the flavors are we're getting, and that's critical, right? And that's a nuance of how we do it. We don't just wait for the still to hit this temperature and go, okay, it's time to cut. Right? It's not a switch in a computer somewhere that says, boop, turn the valve.
And I'll insert here, because Craig often is so academically far ahead of most laymen, right, about whiskey. A lot of people, when we do tours, don't understand that they're cuts you make in a distillation, right?
Yep.
You have the heads, which are come out first, high alcohols. Yeah. You set those aside when you make that cut. You then go into the hearts, and that's the good stuff. That's the stuff that you're going to age. And then you have the tails, which are low alcohol, bitter flavors. Mm-hmm. If you miss those cuts, if you're not precise, that's going to directly impact the flavor of your whiskey. So that's an important component that Craig has done himself, all by taste and feel heretofore since we started this.
And if you wait too long, you're losing productive capacity.
That's right.
So there's the balance.
Yep.
I'm going to also touch on, if I could, a couple things Craig mentioned. A big part of that quality of our products that, as Craig said, we will maintain are our ingredients. We only buy Colorado grown barley.
So all of it.
So that's incredibly important, because even though we're paying more for quality, which you do when you're making a superior product, we've already been in touch with those growers, and we know that our scalability can be supported. So that's a key thing. Our local water is fantastic. The St. Vrain River Valley that runs right behind our building, that water is exceptional, and that will be maintained.
I see this board, for a friend.
Yes.
What is this? Talk to me about this.
So this is kind of our version of a pay it forward, or I call it pour it forward.
Okay.
Right? So you're in here, you can pay for a cocktail for a friend. So when they come in, they get the cocktail. And what happens often is it's not necessarily even a friend. It might be a first responder, or it might be a high school teacher,
or someone you're staying with.
Yeah, or You know, like my friends that let me stay here while I was at Rocky Mountain National Park.
Sure.
So yeah, it's super fun. People dig it.
So I walk in here and I see the name Tegan, and I go, "Oh, my name's Tegan." Right? And so I walk, and so I get a free drink.
Here's your drink.
Here's your free drink, because somebody poured.
In this case, you're paying for a drink.
You're paying for a drink.
Coach Colleen gets the free drink.
Coach Colleen gets it.
So if your name
Tegan.
happens to be Coach Colleen,
yes. Tegan paid for it.
Yeah, we might not believe that from you.
Well, that's fair. That's very fair. And I also noticed at the very bottom, I want to ask you about, there's something at the very bottom that kind of strikes home for Spirit Hound.
Absolutely. The bottom one is basically Whiskey Forever to our friend Martin.
And who's Martin?
Martin is in the photograph up above. Martin was a Navy badass, and an artist. He drew butterflies and kicked ass at the same time. I couldn't pigeonhole him.
Okay.
So he's one of the most amazing human beings I've ever known. He was instrumental helping people during our catastrophic floods in 2013. And unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. So we believe he's in Valhalla with the Norsemen, and probably still kicking ass.
Yeah.
And he has all the whiskey he will ever need.
Fair enough. That's awesome. Well, you can put me down for a free drink for EMS.
Excellent.
I will pay for one of those. They certainly deserve it. My wife works in EMS, and those men and women deserve a free drink. So I'll pay for one for that.
Absolutely.
All right, Craig, tell me about this bottle that I'm looking at right here.
Okay, this is a fun bottle. This is a bottle of our barrel number 1, and by that I mean the very first barrel of whiskey we ever made, that I ever made in my life at all. It is all malted barley, 100% malted barley, and it's got some peated malt in it as well. So the full mash bill was 1,200 pounds of pale malt, 300 pounds of crystal malt, and 600 pounds of peated malt.
All right.
Right? And this barrel, you only get one barrel number 1, right?
Yeah.
So we hung on to it for a long time. You see right here, it's 7 years old.
7 years old. Yeah.
Which isn't bad for a 10-year-old distillery, right?
Yeah.
And we made it. So a lot of times I see that high number. I'm like, wait a minute.
Right.
You've only been here for 2 years. But why do we bottle it at 7 years? You are thinking, I'm sure.
I am.
We're here in Colorado where it's high and dry, and we get a significant angel share, and we also pick up a lot of oak character.
Okay.
And this barrel was starting to get pretty oaky, and it's like, all right, I think it's at its limit. Let's bottle it up. And barrel number 1 has another unique attribute, and that's in the distillation. When we run our spirit still, we recycle some of the heads and tails back into the still every time, right? Mm-hmm. With our new low wines.
Okay.
And when you have barrel number 1, well, there aren't any of those, right?
Right.
They don't exist, and they add some complexity to your flavor. So when we tasted our first 6 barrels, this was the tamest, the simplest, if you will.
Sure.
And that's another reason we left it in the barrel so long, is because, well, let's give it some time to do its thing.
Right. And mature and kind of get there and get ready.
Yep. And it was also kind of the rudder of the work I was doing for distillation and for aging, because we could taste this every 6 months, and this was giving us a clue into the future. What is our whiskey going to do?
Right.
How long do we need to age it? What's the best point?
So this is barrel number 1. You're currently sitting at barrel 264.
Yep.
Right? And each bottling is a single barrel. So can they still get barrel number 1?
They can, because we priced it pretty high. Without the fancy box, it's a $250 bottle.
Okay.
And we have a few cases left.
A few left.
Yep. Believe it or not.
And then a bottle of this, the most recent one.
Yep.
Right, barrel. This is like I said, 264, and I think I saw you have 263 up there as well.
Yep.
Right. How much is a regular bottle of this going for
Our
right
standard
now?
price is $60.
$60 for a bottle of this. Great. You can still pick up a bottle of barrel number 1, or you can pick up a bottle of barrel 264.
We're in Lyons, Colorado, and that's just down the hill from Estes Park, Colorado,
Yep.
home of the iconic Stanley Hotel.
Yeah.
Right? Most people think of the movie The Shining when they think of that, and Stephen King, but it's an icon. It's been here since early 1900s. It's a really cool place, and about a year ago they started a thing in their basement. They call it the Whiskey Vault, and they buy single barrels from distillers. Largely Colorado, but they get them from all over the world as well. Mm-hmm. We were fortunate in that we have a great relationship with those people, and their inaugural barrel, the first single barrel they put in that store, was Spirit Hound barrel number 79. They then added a bunch of other barrels, and what was super fun is I was getting text from this guy's name's McShann Walker. What a great name for somebody selling whiskey. McShann texts me and he's like, it's unbelievable. I've got, some very well-regarded single barrels, some from well-regarded, big distilleries, and people are picking your barrel. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool.
That's very cool. So where does everyone find you again? Run us through that.
The online presence.
Yep.
Yep.
How does somebody get a hold of you?
Get a hold of us on Instagram. Share with us as Spirit Hound Distillers. Or Facebook as Spirit Hound Distillers, or www.spirithounds.com.
Spirit Hounds with an S.
Yep, that's multiple hounds.
Multiple hounds.
Yep.
Okay. Excellent. All right. We hope you enjoyed this talk with the guys. You can find us on all the socials. You can also find us at greatamericanwhiskeycookers.com. Till then, if you can't be good at it. See you next time. Hey, one of the things we really enjoy here at the Bourbon Bunker is sitting by the fire, drinking some whiskey with some friends. If we're lucky, maybe you'll get to join us sometime. In order to do that, head over to our Patreon site, subscribe, pledge some money. We would really appreciate the support, especially as we head to the other distilleries. We got a lot more coming up over the course of the next year, 2 years. So check us out. Until next time, if you can't be good at it. See ya.
There you go.
Is that it?
That is a wrap.